Welcome to the Dreamboat. Remember, you can join the DRI for just £30 a year. You get access to more content, including videos and discounts for our events. It's a great way of finding out more about our work, joining our dream community, and supporting this podcast. Details in the show notes and at driccpe.org.uk/membership. Welcome to the Dreamboat podcast, a place where we talk about everything dreamy, all you wanted to know about dreams and where you might find some answers. My name is Dave Billington, and I'm a psychotherapist, and I'm also director of the Dream Research Institute. And I'm joined by fellow psychotherapist Laura Payne.
Hello, I'm Laura Payne, and I'm also part of the Dream Research Institute. And we're called the Dreamboat because we are actually recording our podcast on a beautiful canal barge here at Little Venice in London called the Boat Pod.
We'll be looking at dreams, talking to guest experts, and answering your questions.
Now, let's get on with the episode.
Do androids dream of electric sheep? That was the question famously posed by science fiction author Philip K. Dick in the book that inspired the Bladerunner films. The book and films are fictional explorations of what it means to have or to be an artificial consciousness. With the rapid growth of AI, this is becoming a hot topic for discussion, even in the dream world.
Yes, as machines adapt and appear to be able to think, it seems like the old philosophical Cartesian notion of cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, is becoming redundant. Instead of cogito ergo sum, will it be somniare ergo sum? I dream, therefore I am. Will the ability to dream differentiate us from robots? Does dreaming presuppose something vital about humans and other living things?
At the heart of Philip K. Dick's question is the relevance of dreams to consciousness, and the question of how we define, assess, and compare human consciousness to other forms of consciousness. So we're starting an occasional series called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? In honor of his question.
Yes, from time to time we're going to be talking to experts in various fields who can shed some light on these really fundamental questions. And today we're going to start by talking about the relevance of dreams to organic consciousness with a leading researcher in the field of altered states of consciousness and evolutionary psychology, and so much more, Professor Katja Valli.
Professor Valli is adjunct professor in the Department of Psychology and Speech-Language Pathology at the University of Turku in Finland, and professor of cognitive neuroscience and head of research at the Department of Cognitive Neuroscience and Philosophy at the University of Skövde, if I've pronounced it correctly, in Sweden. She is also a past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams. Katja, welcome aboard the Dreamboat.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I know this is a massive subject, and we were talking off microphone of, where does this go? And I think that's half the fun of exploring this topic. What is human consciousness? And will it be dreaming that might, help us explore that and make us different from the androids? Have you any sort of thoughts about that?
Well, probably my first thought on the topic is that when we talk about human consciousness and machine consciousness, we really need to define what we mean by consciousness in the first place. Because, otherwise we are talking, consciousness is a concept that has so many different definitions, and in different fields of science, it's used differently. So the way I have used the term consciousness and how I've used to have it defined is that it refers to the ability to have an experience. So to have a subjective experience, it is something that the organism feels or sees or hears. And if we define consciousness as an experience, then the question is, are machines capable of having experiences, or are they only capable of producing reactions that are kind of predetermined by its programming?
Yeah. I mean, it was one of our questions. How are we going to define human consciousness? I don't know. It's a massive philosophical debate, because then you're into, is it something that's produced by the brain and it's a reductionist state, or is it something extra, something dual that emanates from being human? And
Well, maybe that's a good place to start with. As a practical question, in your own research, how do you define that area of consciousness in terms of something that can be measured? Are experiences the key to that?
I would define consciousness as a biological phenomenon, which means that it requires a biological substrate, the brain, or at least some sort of a nervous system, depending on how complex the organism is.
so do you, when you investigate this, obviously you would look at human consciousness. Do you look at animal consciousness as well, and have a look at how animals, being organic, obviously, would process the dream world?
I have only looked at humans, because especially when it comes to dreaming, which is an experience that occurs during sleep, we have no access to anyone's dream directly. We always need the person to report the dream, which of course is not, it's only a verbal report. It's not a real description of the actual experience. And now this means that studying experiences in animals gets really tricky, because we can't get reports from them, not of their waking conscious experiences or their experiences during sleep. But of course, if we think of that humans are just one type of mammal, one type of ape, one type of primate, one type of mammal, and the basic mammalian brain is pretty similar across species, there are probably differences in degrees or the kinds of conscious experiences humans have versus other species have. But I think it would be presumptuous to assume that only humans are conscious.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking that we were almost making a natural assumption that dreams predicate consciousness. Do you believe that? I suppose is a deeper question.
I think that dreams are an integral part of consciousness. And as long as the organism is capable of having subjective experiences during wakefulness, so there is something like to be that organism, maybe its brain is capable of producing experiences during sleep as well. These are just simulated experiences based on real experiences stored in the organism's memory.
Mm.
But of course, the question is, we have still no idea whether animals dream or not, although there is some research that can kind of be interpreted as support for the idea that animals also have experiences during sleep. Like if they're, in some cases, if we can remove the muscle atonia that is typical for rapid eye movement sleep, when our most vivid dreams occur in humans, we can see the animals moving about in the same way as they do during wakefulness when they are engaging in certain behaviors like predatory attacks or stalking. But of course, this is only indirect evidence of the animal having an experience ongoing at the time of the behavior.
Well, when I watch my dog, obviously chasing something, probably next door's cat, and he's running very vigorously while he's sleeping and barking away. You can hear him go, making all these sort of barky noises. It feels really, it looks and feels like a real experience for him while he's asleep.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. Having both cats at the moment and having had a dog, one of my favorite pastime or leisure time activities, my dog sleep and be in rapid eye movement sleep. Because of course, as a human, I anthropomorphize him, and I could only imagine what types of dreams my dog might have been having, barking and flailing away.
I'm aware that there's been some research done from the neuroscience perspective, that we can observe the parts of the brain in humans that are active when they then report a dream, and the parts of the brain down to neurons that are firing as that's happening, and that we can see the same sort of activity happening in animals' brains when they're sleeping. Is that enough to add to that idea, to give some support for that idea that what's happening in animals' brains is the same or similar to what's happening in humans' brains?
If we start with sleep physiology, so basically the mammalian sleep physiology is quite similar across species. There are some exceptions, but most mammals have non-REM sleep and then REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. There have been studies on awake subjects, for example, which neuronal populations are active when we look at something or when we hear something or when we look at a specific type of a stimuli, like a face versus a house. And when recordings have been done during sleep and people have been dreaming, for example, of different types of activities or different types of objects, it seems that the same neural networks that are active during wakefulness when we are having a specific type of experience are also active during sleep when we dream of having a similar type of experience. So, for example, when we hear speech in our dreams, our auditory association areas are active, and so on. So this kind of speaks of the isomorphism between wake and dream experiences, that they share the same underlying neural networks.
Okay. So in that way, and going back to what you said at the beginning, there are experiences are happening. People are having experiences whether they're awake or asleep.
Yeah, based on the electrical brain activity. And there have also been interesting studies in rodents where it is actually possible to record the activity of single cells by placing intracranial electrodes into the animal's brain. And in rodents, those studies have usually involved recording the activity of hippocampal place cells. And these are really unique cells in a sense that when an animal is moving around in its environment, let's say a maze, specific cells respond to a specific location in the maze. So it's basically possible to track the rodent's movement by looking at the sequence of activation in these hippocampal place cells. And when these animals then fell asleep after running around in the maze while awake, the researchers noticed that there's actually the same sequence of activation in these hippocampal place cells as if though the animal was replaying during sleep the running through the maze. Again, the question is whether the rat wasn't dreaming, having the experience of running through the maze, but at least the brain activation pattern repeated the original wake experience.
And again, it's impossible for me at least, to not project my own experience onto that information and think about, if I've been driving all day, I lie down to go to sleep, and the first thing that happens is I see the road and I see the windshield in front of me. So the same, obviously repeated neurons that have been firing all day are still going at night, and something about, I guess, memory consolidation.
Yeah, and also when humans learn a new task, it is often included in these hypnagogic hallucinations that we have on the verge of falling asleep. So during the transition period from wakefulness to sleep, like you just described, seeing the road in front of you after doing a lot of driving during the day. So our brain really is replaying some of the things that we've been doing during the day.
Yeah. And would you say that was a marker of human consciousness? Because arguably you could say that you could program a robot to do exactly the same thing, to replay its brain, or have it perhaps looking at looking at sheep during the day, and then get it to replay looking at sheep while it's sort of in rest mode. You could call the sleep function for an android.
Great question. So in humans and animals, dreaming requires a different state of consciousness, the sleep state. And now, is it possible to build an artificial being that would have different states that would somehow correspond to wakefulness in humans versus sleep in humans? For example, the hallmark of sleeping humans is the sensory disconnectedness from the environment, so that the imagery that we have, the dreams that we have, are really internally generated, and no external stimuli usually enters dream content. So would it be possible to mimic this kind of a state in an artificial being, where it's kind of rerunning experiences that it has collected during a state when it has been interacting with the environment, in a state where it is now disconnected from the environment?
You could argue that that's, putting things down on the memory drive, backing up your database. And is that what we're doing? If you're going to take a reductionist approach to consciousness, is that what we do at nighttime? We just back up the memory drive.
There's clearly evidence that sleep is very important for memory, but there is much less concrete evidence. And I would say that the jury is definitely out on whether this kind of a memory consolidation really requires dreaming, that requires the having of the experience of this memory trace being activated. So the sleep state definitely is important for memory, but is dreaming? Memory consolidation is a necessary brain function, because if we don't store things into memory, we can't function, in a sense, because what our brain is, it's a prediction machinery. It stores experiences into memory in order to predict the future. So basically, we need to be able to anticipate what will happen in the near future, and maybe in case of humans also in the more distant future. But is dreaming a necessary part of this process? So when these memory traces are being consolidated, are they reflected in dream content? Because we know that our dreams often incorporate things from the previous day, previous days, and also from something that has happened much longer ago, especially if these memory traces are emotional, especially if they are negative, so somehow salient. And there is actually very few studies thus far that would have directly looked at dreaming about a specific task on performance in the task. So in one of these studies, participants learned to navigate a maze in the evening. A part of the participants were allowed to sleep on it, and then researchers asked whether they had been dreaming about the task or not. And those who had been dreaming about the task actually performed better in the morning than those people who had slept and not dreamt about the task. But then again, it tended to be that those people who had the poorest performance in the evening also improved the most. They were the ones who dreamt about it. So maybe it was stressful that they didn't perform well enough, and they did much more memory consolidation than those who learned the navigate the maze easily, and thus they improved the most. And maybe also they were thinking about this maze while still awake before falling asleep, and that alone helped them to improve their performance, because we know that mental training during wakefulness also improves performance, so improves memory consolidation.
But there's still something about the saliency there, that if it's more stressful, you're thinking about it and maybe dreaming about it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's clearly evident when we experience something truly stressful. Let's say something that puts our psychological well-being in danger, like having a traumatizing experience. The more negative the experience, the more the person feels that their lives have been under threat, the more likely people are to dream about it and have kind of post-traumatic nightmares. So however the memories are selected for simulation in our dreams, the saliency of the memory trace and the emotional load of the memory trace seems to be one really central determinant of what ends up in our dreams and what doesn't.
I was thinking how much that sounds part of our survival instinct, and that dreaming actually might play a fundamental part of our fight or flight fantasy or whatever, by saving the memories of, say, punching the lion on the nose in the savannah. It means that we're more aware in the future of how to look out for the signs of a lion in the savannah. And so, I never really thought about dreaming being a fundamental part of our survival instinct, because it lays down memories of trauma and past trauma. That's actually quite fascinating, and again, would make us different from an android as such, whose perhaps survival would be determined of whether it was switched on or switched off. It's as simple as that, perhaps. I was also thinking that from a philosophical point of view, memory is an essential quality, or seen as an essential quality of personhood. Can we see ourselves over time and space? And how being able to put memory down during dreaming actually is then part of what establishes us as a person.
Yeah, and it's not only that our dreams include our past experiences, but they anticipate future events or simulate anticipated future events. So like during wakefulness, when our minds are wandering to, for example, a podcast that you have to do tomorrow, you simulate all kinds of scenarios, what could go wrong or could go right, depending on how you modulate your own behavior. It seems that our dreams do the same thing, in a sense that they don't only simulate past events in various combinations, but they are future-oriented simulations. When we are anticipating something happening in the future, again, the more emotional the future event is for us, the more likely it is to end up being simulated in our dreams.
And just to say, we know that a big part of your work is around threat and simulation theories of dreaming. Can you maybe say a little bit more about those two different theories?
Yeah, so as you say, majority of my work on dream content has focused on looking at whether dreams, because their content seems to be a bit biased, whether these biases in our dreams could be markers of dream function. And it seems that our dreams include much more negative emotions, much more threatening events than what we experience during wakefulness. So there is a clear threat bias in our dreams, which could be a sign of an evolved mechanism that maybe after dreams came about during evolution, natural selection started to operate on dreams in a sense that repeating in various combinations, especially threat memories, combining them in novel ways, would have helped our ancestors to better cope with threats in their environment, better recognize different types of threat, better react to them, choose more relevant reaction strategies, and so on. And now we think, okay, so would our dreams really make us better at anything? I mean, do dreams have the power to modulate the brain in a way that the brain would really function more efficiently? And again, mental simulation during wakefulness clearly alters the brain and improves performance. And now if our ancestors would have been dreaming of different types of threatening events throughout their lifetime, from early childhood on, every night, many different dreams, it sounds actually quite plausible that dreams over time could have had an effect on waking life behavior. And that's the whole idea, that whatever the function of dreaming is, this function needs to manifest during wakefulness, because during sleep we are not surviving or reproducing, and that's the currency that evolution works with. And Dave, you also mentioned another evolutionary theory. There are now many different types of evolutionary dream function theories, But the other that I have been working with is the so-called social simulation theory. And here the idea is that one central selection pressure in the primate evolution has been the social environment. Because being able to navigate in your social environment is not only crucial to your survival, but also to your reproduction. Because those with the best social networks, best support networks, are also those individuals who are more likely to find a mate and be supported by their group members. So possibly, as we are inherently extremely social creatures, good our dreams have started to simulate social interactions so that we would become better at making friends and allies, maybe better at recognizing who are not the people that we should associate with, strengthening bonds with our close ones, and so on.
Well, interesting idea. I mean, I think, I'm not an expert in children's dreams, but a lot of children's dreams are exploring threats within the environment at school and things like that, when you sort of go out into the world and replaying scenes from playing with friends and things like that. So that would really fit with the notion that we are recreating our world so we can explore perhaps threats within the social environment that we need to learn how to encounter and find new behaviors to deal with.
Yeah, and also opportunities in the social environment.
Yeah.
So the threat simulation theory focuses more on different types of threats, whether they come from the social environment or not. And then the social simulation theory focuses more on opportunities, sees social environment. And these two theories are actually quite compatible with each other. So they do not rule each other out. They can actually, they are quite compatible with each other.
Well, they sound very compatible, actually, particularly if you just put it under the whole sort of survival package that we're constantly looking at, even though we think we're not. You know, we're constantly, what I call, assessing the savannah to see what's happening out there. We're all vigilant in some way. Is that something that is a definition of human consciousness, bringing it back to the theme? Would an android have to constantly assess its survival over time and space and in the world that it is, the social environment? Probably not. It is, arguably a feature of human consciousness.
Yeah, but the artificial creature would evolve over time. So it would learn from its experiences, and if it would have a consciousness, its consciousness would change over time. How it would change? Would this change be similar to the type of change that humans could go through over their lifespan? And more importantly, human consciousness is probably modulated heavily by things that have happened in our ancestral past, because that's where our brains come from. We have a brain that comes with a default setting, in a sense. Would androids, artificial creatures, have a similar type of evolutionary history that would be there present already when they are born? Probably not, because we couldn't program that into them. But definitely they could evolve over time.
Quantum computing suggests that is the case, that it inherits what's gone before and just develops it by finding new neural pathways, for want of a better description, pathways. Which brings me on to probably the fundamental, probably our final question on this, is human consciousness then something that's dual, that it's not just out of the brain, and that we have something extra, which, for those interested in philosophy, is known as the dualist argument. Is it something else that emanates from us rather than it just being a function of our biological selves?
My take on this would be that it is the function of the brain, and it's not something extra added on top, which of course has some implications. For example, when we think about ideas of afterlife or previous lives, because if I believe that my consciousness is created by my brain, and my brain is unique, it only exists at a certain point in time, when my brain dies, my consciousness will disappear for good.
Yeah. It's a big topic, isn't it? I mean, it brings in so much, and I know we're running up against the clock now because obviously you've brought a fabulous dream of the week for us that we'd like to explore. But yes, again, you beautifully now open up the topic for us because it is huge. You know, I know it's an old philosophical argument. What is personhood and human consciousness? Is it something biological or is it something more? But I'm really loving your start to this, so I really thank you, Katja, because you know it sort of tantalisingly opens up the next sort of approach that we can look at, and so it's been a great kickoff. Thank you. Would you like to read us your dream of the week, and let's see how it fits in with the topic, shall we?
Or if it
does. so this is a dream I had 2 nights ago. And it was a bit striking dream because it started with a very positive vibe and turned into a very negative dream. In this dream, I was going to look at a house that was for sale. It was by seaside in a nice and quiet environment. I actually never saw the house, but somehow I ended up in the garden of a nearby house. And this nearby house was owned by an older couple. They had this nice wooden villa with a luscious green garden, and we were sitting in the garden. There was this pretty white table and chairs around it. We were sitting on the chairs and chatting, and the older couple was really sweet, and the sun was shining, and the colors were really vibrant and brilliant. It was like a summer paradise. And I asked them what is the secret of their long, happy marriage. And then they responded that once you've been through something as horrible as they have been through together, then this kind of an experience glues people together for the rest of their lives. And then suddenly the whole scenery changes, and I become a passive observer of old events when this couple was young. And they had been part of this military unit, a special military unit. In fact, the woman had been the team leader and the man had been the kind of the right hand. Altogether, there were about 10 people in this team, and they had been captured by the enemy. Who the enemy was, no idea. But they were tied up on this metal grate, which was like this huge metal fence. And they were tied from their feet so that they were hanging upside down. And they were hanging in 2 columns and 2 people side by side. And then this metal grid was immersed into a very narrow shaft, and the people ended up really deep underground in such a narrow space that their faces were scraping the wall of the shaft. And now I had become the woman that was hanging from this metal grid from my feet, and it was unbearably hot underground. It was humid. The earth had this really muddy smell. It was hard to breathe. Blood was rushing to my head because I was hanging upside down. My feet were aching, and it was impossible to move because there was no space to move. But it was even more impossible to try to stay calm and relax and stay still. And we were hanging on the grid, and we were trying to console each other and encourage each other. But we were all terrified of this kind of a torture and what would happen to us. And then I woke up.
Wow, that was a pretty powerful dream, Katja. Thank you for sharing it.
It had a pretty gruesome end.
It does, although it sort of seems like there's a circularity to it, that you visited the ending first, which is that you survived, and this is an experience that makes the rest of life maybe a little bit easier. But based on what you've just been telling us about, and the simulation theories that you're very well versed in, how do you see this dream?
Yeah, so this dream could definitely be seen as a threat simulation dream, so being captured and being tortured. It could also be seen as a social simulation a dream in a sense that there is this team of soldiers that are trying to console and encourage each other. So they are trying to support each other, strengthen their bonds. But also this dream has a lot of content that relates to my real waking life. For example, for quite a while now, we've been looking for a house, preferably in a nice quiet place by the seaside. I asked a couple about what is the secret to their happy long marriage. I recently got married. And actually, when I woke up with a really bad migraine, which might explain why certain sensations from my body and from my brain, physical brain, have ended up being simulated in the dream as being hanging upside down and blood rushing to the head.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? I also, when you were talking about the old couple and we were talking about memories and how, laying down of memories as part of the dreaming function, the old couple then recalled a memory and you then went back into that part of the dream, which was their memory and then sort of became your memory, which I found quite interesting. I was also struck by some of the symbolism in the dream. Dave and I here at the DRI, we're always interested in elemental symbolism. You kept talking about it being very hot. So I was thinking about the sort of calcinatio, the transformation by fire or heat in this respect. And there is a lot of transformation in the dream. And you've got the hanged man, which is a really old image that surfaces usually in the tarot card and in some of the old tarot card decks. And the hanged man is a very powerful image of not stasis as such, but life almost being put on hold. And but there's been some very deep transformation that's taking place. So I was quite intrigued by that as an image that sat within the dream. You've just got married. And so, that's a deep transformation. And the old couple, we talk about conjunctio as transformation. It's transformation by the conjunctio image being that of becoming a couple, of union, which you have in the real world become a couple. You're in union with someone. And it's interesting how that was explored in the dream.
I was really struck by, it's almost a contrast that, there's all the terrible things that are happening. There's all, the capture and torture and all of that. But it's all in the context of what seems really relevant to somebody who's been recently married, which is how the experiences of life affect being a couple. And it just seems like within this dream, there's a real wisdom in that. Life is life, and there's going to be struggles, there's going to be difficult things. God knows buying a house is one of those difficult things. But the way that you get through things it actually strengthens being a couple and is what helps you last ultimately. And it's like lovely little message in there, despite all these horrible, horrible images.
Yeah, thank you very much for offering me kind of a very different perspective to my dream, because as a scientist, I look at it, how is my waking life affecting my dreams? But you find a bit more meaning in the dream than what I had originally found. And I especially, the notion that you saw that, okay, the couple survives. They become an old couple that lives in this summer paradise. I think that's kind of, I hadn't even thought about it, because I chronologically, I thought it from the beginning of the dream to the end of the dream and not the other way around.
Freudians would call that wish fulfillment. And you're making me think back to the topic. Obviously, if we take the dreams are the functions and serve the functions that you talked about from a scientific neurological point of view, what happens to symbolism and the notion of symbolism in dreams, again, is that part of human consciousness that we unconsciously, the Jungians would say, tap into a deeper collective symbolism that's available to organic consciousness in some way?
That's not really my area of expertise, but I would say that we we are born into this world with certain default settings in our brain. And for example, children dream much more of animals than adults do, and especially of wild animals, not the type of tame animals that they see around them. And then gradually with time, their brain becomes adjusted to the world as it is around them, that there are really no need to be afraid of wild animals, and there are more tame animals, and in fact majority of the animals disappear and are replaced by people. So maybe there are some default settings in our dreams that are then reflected in what people conceptualize as archetypes.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and it's and yet another topic for yet another conversation. But as we did say off mic at the beginning, it is often about finding more and better questions to ask rather than having all the answers, which is really exciting for us and leaves a lot to explore. But we are pretty much out of time for today. So thank you so much, Katja, for joining us and for sharing a dream and sharing a small part of your vast knowledge on this subject. It's been really great to speak with you.
Yeah, I hope you'll come back on board again soon and help us develop this topic, because it is really interesting. And so thank you very much for coming on board and also sharing one of your own personal dreams. I really appreciate that. Fabulous dream. Thank you. So I suppose it's time to end up now. So do androids dream of electric sheep? To be continued, I think, is the answer of that one. So to everybody, sweet dreams.
Keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.
So, thank you for joining us for this week's episode. Don't forget to like us and leave comments on your favourite podcast platform. As I'm sure you know, that's the way we build an audience for the Dreamboat podcast and also to spread news about dreaming. And as we said, there are many ways you can share your dreams at the DRI, the Dream Research Institute.
Yes, we have courses, events, and workshops, and we want to hear from you. So check out the show notes for links, or find us on Instagram and on our Facebook page and on our website at driccpe.org.uk. And if you want to explore your dreams further, or you would like to support us, you can join the DRI as a member for just £30 a year. As a member, you will get discounts for all of our events and short courses. You'll get our newsletter with latest dream research news, and we'll also be adding other special member benefits during the year. Of course, members' dreams will always be given preference for reading on the podcast Dream of the Week slot. So go to the link on the show notes and become a DRI member today. Keep dreaming and keep sharing your dreams.